Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of WVD Monthly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got my cast of characters with me. My co-host, Bill Sutton. Bill, how's it going?
Going well, Andy. How are you?
Good. How's your? We were just chit-chatting about Monday or life in general. You wrapping it up, or is it a couple more hours of craziness ahead of you?
No, there's probably at least another half hour or more, at least. So,
yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I hope you know that I'm also working my butt off over here.
I know you are.
Well, we're lucky to have Rob Shaw with us. Rob, how's it going?
It's going well. On the same effort of what you're saying there. It's fun working for a West Coast company where you live in the East Coast and everybody wants you to keep going.
My life historically has been the other way around, where it was I'm on the East Coast and expecting the world to work my hours. I've never really worked with a West Coast based company that starts later, but that works a lot later. I guess you get East Coast early starters, and then you got West Coast all-nighters, I guess.
Yeah, you do.
Well, Rob, I appreciate you joining me. Let me share my screen here. We're going to go through the April updates to WVD. I talk to people all the time. We talked about it on the last podcast. How do you think Microsoft's doing as far as evolving the WVD part of the platform, and then also as far as evolving the Windows 10 Enterprise on Azure side of the equation?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've noticed recently, we see more and more native customers, yet we're still seeing the most number of users are driving through to Azure with Citrix or VMware, or in some cases leveraging like NetApp or Nerdio. So I think the lion's share of groups where they need good user experience, or they need quality management or simplified management, I think the lion's share still tends to be driven, I think, with both a Citrix or VMware control plane.
Do you see many people going from Citrix to WVD native, or do you see people that are just getting into the ecosystem come in at WVD native and not knowing the difference?
I've seen some folks. We run into folks a lot of times where they're trying to save cost and they're kind of hell bent to go that route. And I do see them sometimes struggle being able to do that natively. Some that have made that shift. Most and a lot of times our guidance is the easier putt is to shift with the control plane that it's going to work with all of your endpoints. It's going to work the way that your management team knows how to manage it. So,
yeah. I just got off a call a little while ago. One of our customers who uses Citrix and iGel, they brought in some consulting firm that told them not to use any type of EUC play, routing protocol play. And that was all well and good until you asked the consulting firm why they said that. And they're like, well, we've never heard of Citrix. And I'm like, okay, so what cave are you living in that Citrix WVD, VMware Horizon isn't in your daily vernacular? Those people still exist, apparently. And all you have to do, and I'm going to go back to these guys and point this out in a minute, all you got to do is look at Microsoft's investment in WVD. And if that's not a good sign in the fact that this is the way you move forward, I don't know what is.
Yeah. I hopefully that's just a fresh grad who's new to technology. Wow.
No, it's actually a consulting firm. And what they're really trying to do is they're trying to take business and put it in their bucket so that they can do it their way. And it's all they know.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, before we jump into this, any thoughts, comments around what's happening around us?
Yeah, I mean, we to Rob's point, we've seen a few customers that come to us and said, we want to try WVD, and then we want to also try WVD with the Citrix control plane. So they want to try, they do a small project for just WVD only, just the UI from Microsoft. And then they say, after we do that, we want to take those spin up some multi-session images and manage them with Citrix. And they see benefits on both sides, but where we've really found most of them to land, not all, but most of them end up landing in the Citrix or VMware area for the reasons you stated, Rob. We do see a lot of them want to kick the tires and say, I want to see what this looks like. and understand how it works and see whether it's for us. And the smaller shops are more likely to consider going native, but most of the larger shops are going to move to a different control plane for a number of reasons.
And I would say in the education space, especially, where they really are less concerned about user experience and more concerned with cost. I think. I think they're able, their requirements are a lot lower, and in some cases they're a lot higher. Certainly graphic requirements and things are, can be off the charts. So I'm not saying that's the same for everybody, but I do see in that vertical typically a lot of customers successful with the plans. At the same time, University of Auburn, for example, they they leverage different tools. Alabama, Birmingham leverages Citrix on WVD as well. So you still see that as well. I think it comes down to what your management team is used to manage things with. And those that were trying to run native RDS farms, they find it easy to do native WVD. But those that have quality control planes, I think, I also think the Win10 multi-user, because I guess that was the second part of what you asked, Andy. 97% of customers we're seeing are investing time in understanding the Win10 multi-user OS. Right. They don't have to reskin the desktop, and they get the multi-user capability and the economics there. Plus, they don't have to pay for an RDS or VDA cal if they already have an enterprise license. So it's something that everybody in the Citrix and VMware world have been saying for years. Hey, if I could just get rid of that VDA cal or RDS cal cost, there's an option to get there.
Yeah, this is probably the first time I had this conversation in this part of my career. I was at Dell World and I went to a presentation, and one guy presented on Citrix and Horizon, that type of solution. And the other guy presented on pure RDP, RDS. And I went up to the small college, the guy who was presenting afterwards, and asked him how he evaluated the other players versus doing it with just straight up Microsoft. This is 10 years ago. And he said he had never touched the other ones. He had no idea. So I just started asking about some basic features, and he's like, well, that'd be nice. I wish I could do that. I was like, well, you could if you tried something else. I mean, I appreciate you standing up here and talking about like an expert, but you can't be an expert unless you've kind of touched all those technologies and have a real valid opinion across all of them, and not just the only one you've ever seen.
Completely agreed. I think that's one of the values that you at XenTegra, you guys provide, is I think you do a lot of due diligence on main platforms and management platforms and add-on tools, like the shirt you're wearing, for example, Igel, great product out there. So I think you vet them all, when you provide that guidance to the customer.
Yeah. Yep. At least give them a chance to understand at a high level what the differences are, and then explore from there. Well, let's jump into the features for the April 2021 announcements. This first one looks familiar. I feel like this was there last time. Use the Smart VM on Connect feature. Is that something that was in there last time that's gotten smarter, or am I misconstruing that with a different feature?
So it's just the Start VM on Connect. That's just the idea was that to date, WVD is not so much of an on-demand scale set, right? It's a scale set that you have to set a schedule. So if I say 8 a.m., bring up the VMs, and at 6 p.m., take those VMs down. And if they're multi-user, put them into drain mode at 6 p.m. so it doesn't take any more connections. Mm-hmm. But then if all of a sudden a bunch of people, log in at 2 a.m., we have nothing for that, right? Because those VMs are not going to spin up until morning. Well, Start VM on Connect allows us for those personally assigned VMs, right? So most people will call that a persistent assigned VM. That those VMs can shut off by schedule, but then if the user connects at 2 a.m, it'll start up for them, right? So there'll be some delay, certainly, while they wait for their VM to restart. We don't we see this as kind of a initial phase of doing that on-demand capabilities of it doesn't do anything for session hosts where I got multiple users where my XenApp farm can start to fire up VMs based on users. But today we don't do that, and we don't do it for the multi-user. We hope to do that in the future. And additionally, this when hibernation comes available, it can auto hibernate users and then users VMs. We won't put any people to sleep. And then as users connect, it could kind of resume those VMs once that capability comes available in Azure.
And Rob, that's all about the balance between trying to be optimal with power management and cost of consumption versus user experience.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Certainly, if you want to write scripts, you can write scripts and create run books that will start up VMs on demand, and you can do that. But if you want an out of the box play, that's where we would leverage. We have a couple of vendors that only do some minimal sets. They don't do a whole protocol, a whole broker, but they can do some management there to help make that a better out of the box experience for folks. Yeah. And those would be like Sapago or Nerdio or even NetApp, that they can do some of that automation.
So, Bill, any thoughts on the start VM on connection piece?
So, Rob, I assume this is the VM deallocated before, just like a normal VM?
Yeah. So
it's going through the whole startup process. So it could take 30 seconds to a minute for it to come up for the user, as long as they're aware of that. This makes perfect sense in terms of the 2 a.m., person that can't sleep, gets up in the middle of the night and is thinking about something, they can jump in and get to their VM. You just have to wait a little longer.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's the user seeing during all this?
They get a delay message, while their VM's prepared for them. We hope that once that's just a resume from hibernation, that becomes, less. More importantly, they get to keep the state of what they were working on, for developers especially.
Yeah.
Now, is that a delay message that says we're starting your VM, or just a generic message?
Yeah, it's pretty generic in that we're making your resources available for you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's look at this next one here that says the required URL check tool. What's that all about? Sounds exciting.
Yeah. And a lot of these are not the most glorious releases this April. It's kind of a middle of the time frame for us. But basically, what we're looking at here is that one of the key accomplishments of WVD is security first, right? You make no direct connections into your VMs. Everything is a reverse connect. So because of that, things are really fairly locked down. There are some required URLs that you need to be able to get to. So a lot of times folks open up nothing, and in fact may even force all traffic to go straight back to on-prem and go out their firewall. We don't recommend that. But in security-minded environments where you got to get through InfoSec, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get the resources out there. So these URLs, some of them are URLs, for example, the KMS one to authenticate KMS for the Windows 10 multi-user, which is only usable from Azure. So if it doesn't originate from Azure to make that request, or if it goes to their firewall and out, it'll fail. Even though it can get somewhere, it had to start from Azure. So we have to open up these URLs to be able to run WVD, and you can see those are the default ones. But the nice thing is, when folks don't turn those on, they don't know what the problem is. This URL check tool, you can run this command. It's like WVD agent URL tool.exe, and you get an output right there at the bottom of the screen that shows what's not accessible and what is accessible. And so then that it's there.
Now, you're running this on the virtual desktop host, or you're running this on the endpoint?
You can run it from any of the virtual desktops. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that'll just try and make that connection. Sorry.
So I assume you don't want anything not accessible, right, Rob?
Correct.
Okay.
Only takes one.
Yeah,
That's right.
This would have been helpful about 6 months, 8 months ago, maybe. We were doing a WVD project for a government agency, and of course they were pretty darn locked down and wanted nearly an act of Congress to open up anything. So this would have been, we had to go through the articles, and if you scroll down further in that article that Andy had open, there's a whole list of what should be open, and we had to go through that manually to get them to open them.
Was this for our friends up in Alaska?
Yes, sir.
All right. Yep, I remember that because I think I remember sending hey, we got to get to these.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
That KMS core one is the one specifically that ends up being needed there that we run into a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, we did a project in Alaska. I didn't get to go. I didn't
get to go either.
True Gotch.
Yeah.
Which is the best that somebody could tell me it was like the TVA.
Yeah.
But it also had to do with Indian reservations as well. So
yeah.
So super nice people.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right. So this next updates to the Azure portal UI for WVD, Windows Virtual Desktop. Rob, kind of some housekeeping type stuff, or is there something pretty revolutionary here?
Are you looking at for the team stuff?
That's the next one. The one I've got highlighted here says updates to Azure portal UI. Teams.
Yeah, there's if you've been in Azure portal for any time, each time you come in, you may see small tweaks, and that's just part of what Azure portal goes through. Some of those are just Azure portal pieces that are just that they trickle down to WVD. Some of them are specific to the WVD control plane, and the R blades specifically. We're always trying to make things a little easier to manage. I think that top one was one that we ran into a good bit, where folks would get their VMs would show unavailable when they would try to see the information. Usually it was showing up in any of the monitoring software. They were probably finding it there first. I think those are some of the key things that we've seen in there. But you'll probably see those updates come pretty frequently.
Okay, so the next one, which I think you may have been jumping ahead to, maybe because you're excited about it, and probably rightfully so, but the teams for WVD updates.
Yeah. So, it's funny, we think of Teams as one product, but it's really a bunch of little tools inside of Teams, where, some things are, obviously sharing sessions or collaboration or an IM tool or, SharePoint, kind of integration. And so a lot of different things happen inside of Teams, and the Teams team, and they call themselves that. They actually have said, don't think of us as, that we can make everything, just say, hey, Teams is supported in VDI. If we waited for everything, we might be waiting. So some new things. We were seeing some high CPU pieces. So you'll see some acceleration that shows up as video processing. But what we were seeing in monitoring was seeing some CPU spikes. And when you've got, a few thousand people all pretty frequently using Teams as their primary method for communicating, those CPU spikes caused a lot of delays in the farm. You can see some crashes that have been fixed. There was one with the camera where which camera came on, it didn't, at least the way I thought of it, was it didn't remember my profile as to which camera I wanted on. So, everybody had to look at a bunch of wires on my desk instead of my ugly face, which might be more pleasing, actually, to look at the wires, perhaps.
Now, is this mostly related to Teams collaboration, like audio, video type stuff, or is it even just the app itself crashing?
Yeah, everything. Performance-wise, we've really pushed back to the Teams group about if you could, especially when we look at like what gets into the profile and it gets reloaded, that if we can, kind of scrape some of that stuff out when we don't always need it, especially with non-persistent environments, that's certainly nice. So there's been some, effort to try and reduce that.
Yeah.
The other thing is being able to improve the performance. What Teams in Windows Virtual Desktop, what we're doing is we're sensing that the endpoint that the user's connecting from is a Windows 10 device that's of a certain level, and there's a Teams client that's capable there, and we're redirecting it to that Teams client to do a peer-to-peer connection, so that it doesn't go from the user's desktop up to the virtual desktop session and then over to wherever the user's session is. It kind of does it from point to point, but everything looks like it's running in the session. We do some video overlays. So not all the capabilities always there from the beginning. We're starting to kind of bring that in. We're also looking at the way that it was done was in kind of a modular approach, so that they'll be able to pick that up and apply that to, say, the Mac OS or the Linux OS, or even mobile device operating systems as well.
And in theory, you just turn this on and it just works, right? There's not a lot of configuration to it.
Right. The key factors are making sure you have the right version of Teams, make sure you have the right version of Teams running at the endpoint, and you're not trying to do it from a non-Win 10 device, at this stage. And IGEL, I believe, they have acceleration for Teams built into their thin client now too. Obviously, Citrix and VMware have had that capability, to run to their clients already as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great collaboration, voice and video, scanning. Those are areas that have always been kind of a reach for virtual desktop environments, and to see Microsoft including it early in the product like this is a good indicator that they're in it for real, and they're going to have a bunch of their own users running on top of using their brokering system to connect to Windows 10 in Azure hosted sessions, whether it's for WVD, and there's going to be people still doing it with the other brokering protocols too, for sure.
And I think as a side note there, Andy, I might mention that this is really our first collaborative tool that we've optimized. We're bringing that into just doing multimedia redirection for Windows Virtual Desktop, things that we have in native RDP, but that we didn't have them in WVD today. But we also see some of the third-party vendors, multimedia type organizations, VoIP companies, where they're taking some of this tool set to be able to apply to their stack as well.
And you think Microsoft's going to be open to having Zoom, WebEx, you name it, optimized as well? In
Zoom,
WVD?
I believe Zoom they've already done some effort. Avaya's doing some effort. Probably the one you probably won't see, Skype, right? Because that would require, those same folks going and rebuilding, and probably be more difficult, to where that might require a different vendor to deliver that.
Yeah. Well, I don't see the massive need for that, and it should be waning, whatever the need was. But we'll see. Yeah. Hey, Bill, before we move on away from this one, any comments or thoughts?
Does this, Rob, does this require any specific version, or I presume the latest version of the RD Web client or the WVD client? I presume you want to have the latest thing no matter what, but
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Cool. And then the endpoint as well, right?
Yeah.
You got to get.
So, Rob, what's the best way to see that Teams, like a web meeting, is being optimized? Is it the same old thing where you drag it around and the video kind of chases the window? Is it measuring CPU performance inside the virtual desktop? How do you prove to people that it's working other than a superior user experience?
For me, unfortunately, it's that I'm hearing that it's not optimized. How to verify? I tell you what, on our next one, I'll bring that to our meeting, because I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. All right. This magical world of app containerization and having it available to be accessed from any type of Windows operating system at a moment's notice because it's in a package ready to go. MSIX app attach tell us where we're at with that.
Yeah, so this has been kind of a long journey, right? It is, as you mentioned, it's not an easy task, right? Microsoft has had a long history, in the app V world, of being able to virtualize applications and being able to let them self-update their package, which is there's a tremendous amount of value there, and certainly there's a lot of layering technologies out there. I think that the really interesting thing, two things about MSIX app attach, and first of all, that's two separate things. MSIX is kind of if you want to call it an amalgamation between MSI and the next version of MSI and AppV, right? Kind of an app virtualization capability. That's MSIX side. App attach on the other side is the ability to kind of put it into a virtual disk and have that dynamically attached to a virtual machine, to a multi-user session, to a user's as a published app, however they decide to use it, right? The other thing that's interesting here is that the software vendors are on board with, at least we've heard that they're on board with creating packages in the MSIX format, something we didn't find with AppV ever. Yeah. That they might, start to come that way, out of the box. There's some nice tools out there that can look at your application and tell you if it's compatible. Like Remo 3 does a nice job of doing a smoke test of your application, and there's others like Nerdio and NetApp that can package your application and help you go through that process and help with the assignments. So it also is the idea of trying to get to I just manage the base OS image and patch that base image and maybe just the apps that everybody uses, and then everything else could be hopefully living in a virtual disk that gets attached when their session attaches. So it's the FSLogix approach to application. So if I can take the app mix and the user profile and keep those separate from the machine, that's golden if I can get there, right?
Is it a symbolic link like FSLogix is? Is that how they're doing it?
So symbolic. So I think it's still a hidden link to some degree, the way it is with FSLogix. And it uses some of that same capability in FSLogix where you could do app containers, right? I could assign those to users based on AD membership. I think we're going to see MSIX app attach also be able to not have to be native AD and be able to do Azure AD, where FSLogix is headed that way as well. Right. There's still some limitations today with app attach. We can't do plugins to applications, and we can't do drivers, right? So to get around that, you'd have to put the driver into the base image and let the rest of the application attach it at login.
But to be clear, and when you compare this to like something like AppV, this isn't isolation per se, is it, Rob? This is right. More packaging, right?
That's right. Yeah, you don't get the isolation. Now, where you do kind of have the isolation is, as long as I assign different apps to different users and the same user doesn't need to use both applications, then in that way I do get some isolation.
Sure.
If one user has to use both apps and they don't live together, then that is where you're going to have those conflicts. That's a good point, Bill.
Yeah,
and certainly I think in that space, you have, well, AppV's really kind of going away. You've got ThinApp, which I don't hear mentioned that much, that does have that capability. And then I guess the only thing out there still today would be the micro isolation from the Profile Unity tool at Liquidware. Mm-hmm. That might be, for some people where they need to get that.
Right.
Well, I just like the fact you've stopped and called out that MSIX is one thing, right, and app attach is something else, and they came from two worlds, but now they're colliding, and maybe finally we have that thing we've been looking for so long.
Yeah. It's been a long journey, because I think we announced it a couple of years ago, almost 2 years ago. But it is now generally available, which is nice.
All right. So the last update here, last feature is the Mac OS client now supports Apple Silicon and Big Sur. Did it not before?
Yeah, so that's just a change in Mac OS where they're shifting alliances with vendors. I think in one case, they're kind of expanding outside of only Intel, and in the other, they're shifting to Intel. So just to make sure that we stay in support for both. I think I don't really know what it took to make that work. It may have just been validation, but it is there now. The biggest thing that I get on the Mac OS today is folks looking for team support. The same thing we can do for Win 10. We get a lot of requests for that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Microsoft's committed as much as possible to keeping all the endpoint OS clients in lockstep with each other, but it's not an easy thing to do. That's where the platform really gets spread out, and it's probably a lot of effort.
Yeah, I believe you're right. We recently got support for Wise clients, which was something we didn't have for Wise ThinOS, which was nice. I think that may have been maybe a month and a half ago. So their version ThinOS 9.1 now has a native WVD support, which has been really requested. I think, Bill, since you mentioned the government has a bunch of those type of devices, and
yeah.
And of course, we taxpayers, we don't like them going out and buying new devices when they have devices that could work. So that's been huge. Been working with a lot of customers that had them and were looking for options.
Well, guys, that's the end of the list. Bill, did you have anything else on any of these that you wanted to bring up and talk through at all while we got the master on here?
Not really. No, I think we covered everything.
Okay. Well, I think we just continue to see month after month. We keep seeing the product evolve, and a lot of things that took years and years for others to come up with are rapidly happening in the Microsoft world, while the others continue to, lead the way forward with new endeavors. But it's certainly interesting to watch this and watch how Microsoft is going after this space. And I tell people all the time, there was a point in time where Microsoft would tell you virtualizing and delivering is not the answer. I think it's pretty clear that they see it as the answer.
Yeah, it's definitely been an enjoyable journey to kind of see this kind of launch and evolve. And I think probably we've said it before, continue to say it, is that where WVD is like a 20-year-old startup, right, based on the RDS capabilities, and I think it'll continue to be both a solid platform for partners as well as a fully featured offering for others. So it is certainly a very aggressive product development group to continue to add value to the native offering, and at the same time, VMware, Citrix, Nerdio, NetApp, all of them, do a great job of adding additional benefits there too. So we appreciate all the work you guys do over there at XenTegra as well.
Well, the other thing to highlight in all that conversation is Microsoft is ultimately looking for those workloads in Azure, whether you use WVD or Nerdio or Citrix or VMware or you name it. That's their real angle, right?
Yeah. I think for organizations where they have a control plane that they like, more than likely, if it's they're using it on-prem, they're using Citrix or VMware, they'll be able to manage that same capability in Azure and be able to make a shift. So whether it's just your burst workload, or it's a DR strategy, or it's just a certain work group that makes sense for, say, remote developers or vendor access, those are the things that we see folks really looking to shift to cloud first in those spaces.
Okay.
And obviously the economics make sense in those. If you got a redundant data center that you're paying to run that, instead, being able to shift to cloud, it makes a tremendous amount of sense.
Yeah, it just solves a lot of challenges that way. And if you can get the costs under control on how you do it, then now you got a win-win.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining. We'll do it again in a month.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob.
Take care, guys.